So it seems like they're doing a bit of a media tour, doing a bunch of interviews with streamers. This is like from some Chinese streamer. I think there's one coming up from a couple other, not Chinese people too, coming soon. So we'll probably have a lot to talk about. But let's go through some of this stuff. I think it's very important, and it's coming directly from Ian Hazzikostas. So here's the summary. It's be in the description, Wowhead article. But let's go through the questions. I'll give my thoughts on his answers. Mythic Plus is one of the core progression content now. More and more players love it and spend a lot of time on it, but there is no special reward for pushing high keys. Will there be an official ranking system for the Mythic Plus in the future? And maybe award the high ranking teams with some title like Sinful Gladiator? Will there be other rewards for time high keys, for example, like 20? So this is something that a lot of people have been talking about. Faxi especially always bringing this up. Personally, I'm sure it would be great to reward these people. I don't necessarily like the idea of a gladiator thing though, because I do feel like it's there's not a lot of reasons for most people to push. You know what I mean? More gladiator is much more prestigious because it's PvP. But I would definitely like to see more. 20 plus. That's good. Good start right there. So anyway, Ian says yes, we love Mythic Plus, and it's amazing seeing the community embrace it. It's been incredibly amazing seeing some of the top Chinese teams break all the records and showing the world how to do Mythic Plus properly. That's interesting. Yeah, we saw that in BFA a lot, right? There are some incredibly high keys, and it's fun to watch. And yes, we want to have some high-end recognition in the same way that in PvP, the very, very top players of Sinful Gladiator, we have Hall of Fame for Raiders. We do agree that Mythic Plus should have something similar in Chains of Domination coming up very soon. Coming to the PTR within a week, we're actually looking to introduce an in-game Mythic Plus rating. So you'll be able to have a score, you'll be able to see other people when they apply for your dungeon groups and have a progression, again, similar to how PvP works. I think that will help. So it doesn't sound like he's confirming any type of gladiator style stuff. But yeah, the score being in-game is basically now just going to function like you might have a PvP rating or something like that. So that's good. I mean, not really vastly different from Mythic Plus. From the Raider IO situation, probably be some visual designation for people of the highest score too. Maybe, who knows. Anyway, we're all curious about how the dev team come up with ideas like Storming and Spiteful, especially melee players curious the most. These two affixes are nightmares to melee players. You have to watch out for the hurricanes or the little purple mob that can 2 or 3 shot you while they have to deal with the boss or fight mechanics. Okay, if there's a spawn of a spiteful in the middle of a boss, I don't know. Anyway, on the opposite, range players have less pressure when facing these two affixes. Will there be more tuning? Yes, it's something we're actively discussing for Season 2. We made some changes to Spiteful already via hotfix to reduce their melee range, making them wait a little bit longer before they start chasing, hopefully to make it less punishing for melee, but we agree that there's been several different affixes. We're sanguine drops pools on the ground, and range don't really have to worry about that, but melee do. Cracking can be a big problem too if you have multiple melee. There should be better balance of affixes there, and we're looking specifically at the design of our new affixes, of our newest affix, Storming and Spiteful for Season 2. So, I mean, I don't know what they could be looking at. The affixes, this is not a problem with the affix. This is a problem with being melee, and this has always been part of being melee. So, from what I can tell, there's nothing to change here. This is just how melee works. So, melee is typically in a stronger position. That's probably the bigger issue. Typically, last expansion, especially, having a couple melee was beneficial for a variety of reasons, but this expansion range have just been better. Anyway, this should be an interesting question. Will there be match? Oh, what the hell did I do? Anyway, there will be an interesting question. Will there be matchmaking system for Mythic Plus in the future? Like match similar level players through built-in ranking or scoring system, or do Mythic Plus together? This could be very complex to achieve, but it sounds very fun. So this is something that a lot of people have been asking about, and a lot of people now think that it's on the way because once they have an in-game official scoring designation, maybe you can just start automatically pairing people of similar ranks together. I think it would be a terrible idea, but if people choose to use it, that would be their own mistake. But anyway, it's something that comes a lot. We hear this in PvP also. People who wish there was some kind of rated solo queue system. The approach that we've taken so far, and I think we continue to focus on, is to try to make it easier to find people of a similar skill level with similar interests to do this content. We think there's a lot more that we can do with the group finder, and even just making it easier to, without add-ons, see their rating and experience of people who you're grouping with will help. But ideally, you should also search more easily for specific dungeons, difficulty levels, specify whether you just want to complete the dungeon or whether you want to push the key higher, and what type of group you're looking for. I think all of these factors can help people find each other more easily. The big concern with matchmaking is that in WoW, it's unlike a lot of other games that have matchmaking, where in Overwatch and MOBA, Or in a MOBA like League, you might play different champions, different heroes, and WoW, you are your class, and that's not something you can change. The composition matters tremendously for group success. So if we randomly match you with teammates that don't seem like a good combination of classes, or who you would prefer, I don't think that's going to be the most fun experience. So we prefer to give players control over the groups. So this is funny this got brought up because I was actually thinking about doing this. A lot of people have been talking about this on the forums. So I thought it might be funny to do a stream, like a challenge type stream, where I invite the first 5 people that sign up. List my key, first 5 people, no matter who they are. And I was thinking that would kind of be what people are asking for, and we could see the results. Maybe it's completely like, you know what I mean? Like, and should we control for score? Yeah, I think we should. I don't think we should. I think we should just let the first 5 people sign up, because realistically, they're never going to be like, okay, it's only 2K people who could queue with 2K people, right? Like, that's not how Blizzard's ever going to handle it, regardless, even if they have their own system. So if that did ever happen, you would get the results from me attempting to do it. But I don't, it just doesn't work with the Keystone system. It's never going to. They would have to change the Keystone system because, yeah, and like Ian properly, this is important to say this. Yeah, you might get stuck with 3 Shadow Priests. You know what I mean? It's like, do you want that? I would never leave my own key. If I was serious about doing my own key, never leave it up to that. Never once. So why would anybody use the system? I don't know. But it's an interesting thought. Looking back at the question for the Mythic Plus ranking system coming in 9-1, could you break down a little bit about what the score would be like, how the system would match your score with competing high keys or low keys? So here's it's starting to get a little more interesting. Sure. We're actually still working out the details, and we want to iterate on it over the course of the PTR. But honestly, for those that are familiar with Raider.io, it's not too different. The idea is a base score per dungeon based on the level you completed, with a small bonus if you completed it well ahead of time, and your total score is a product of the range of dungeons you've done. We do want to add separate scores, separate bonuses for doing it on Tyrannical and Fortified, to encourage players to complete both versions, as opposed to just pushing on Fortified week and taking it easy on Tyrannical. There's different types of skill sets required for both. We also want to tie this into things like the requirements to upgrade your gear for Valor and achievements like Keystone Master. Instead of just being do all dungeons at 10, it could be more get your score rating to 2200, kind of like it is in PvP. First of all, the last part, very good idea. That's the way it should be handled. I think it's much better, although I do worry about how they're going to scale their score. Like if you can just pay for a 20, you know what I mean? And then that's all the score you actually need to get credit for an achievement, that would be a bit concerning. But regardless, great idea on paper. And I'm very pleased to hear that they're at least considering a weekly score, it sounds like. So we'll see what that means. I don't know. Separate bonuses for doing it on Tyrannical and Fortified are the words. Now, this is probably translated. I don't fully understand how it's transcribed. So maybe that's not the right wording, because I don't understand what bonuses would refer to. But yeah, I'm very, very, very eager to see how this plays out, because this could be not exactly what I was looking for, but it's way, way better than what Raider.io has been doing. That would be really cool to see. About the Chains of Domination, many players know that the new seasonal fix will be domination. Okay, anyway, so this question is pointless. They don't have anything to announce. They just say that we're not sure yet, basically. So we're not quite ready yet. Nothing to say. Other than Spiteful and Storming, are there going to be new affixes? Also, no, nothing. Nothing here, no new affixes. I want to read these too, though. That was Mythic Plus stuff, but I want to see some of this too. In the current expansion, some classes have their group buff specialties, such as Warrior's Battle Shout, blah, blah, blah. All classes had group buff spells before the boss fight, such as Horn of Wisner. So will these spells return in the future? We're not currently planning on giving everybody a buff. One of the challenges here is we want classes to feel a bit different from each other, and when everyone has something, yes, it's cool to be a part of that ceremony of seeing all those buffs go up before you pull the boss, but at the same time, it can start to feel too much of the same, so we want every class to have some unique benefits. Okay, fair enough. The melee, I don't know why you would ask that question. Like, I don't know why you would answer this question, because it's like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. Why, like, I don't know. I guess they really don't screen the questions, because some of these questions are like, yeah, no, nothing right now. Anyway, the balance between melee specs and range specs has always been controversial. No matter from boss to dungeon to seasonal fix, it seems like the dev teams favor range more than melee. Does this meet the original design? What were the reasons for these balance designs being melee and range, and will there be more adjustments? Guess this is something that really the class design teams talks about a lot. We want melee and range to have advantages and disadvantages. I think it's natural when the obvious strength of range is that you can stand at a distance and strike your enemy, even if you have to move or move away from some mechanic or something on the ground. It's very easy for encounter designers in dungeons and raids to make encounters that are punishing for melee. So we think there's more that we can do in terms of class mechanics and how we approach the design of our encounters, so that there's some situation where you feel happy to be in melee and actually the range have the harder time. We don't want it to always be equal, but there should be a back and forth. And we agree that right now melee are probably suffering more than they should. Again, I don't agree with that. I think they're suffering the same amount they always have. It's just melee in general are not very good right now. Let's put it this way. I favored range far more in Nyalotha as a raid, like, somebody who organizes a raid. And obviously, melee was incredibly powerful in BFA. Like in Mythic Plus, it was dominated by melee. So it's not really, I don't agree with any of this. I don't know why they're even talking about it. I think whoever's asking this question is just maybe a little jealous or something. Like, this is how melee has always been, even like back in classic. Like, you know what I mean? Melee was just stronger than range for a lot of reasons, and that's what would kind of offset it. And that's no longer the case. So they're not suffering more than they should be. They're just weak. They're just not as strong, and a lot of that comes down to the AOE changes, right? So it is quite apparent that many beast mastery hunters love their pets instead of their characters. What the? It's been a long time since there was a new model for the rare spirit beast. We are now in Shadowlands, the realm of the dead, so will the Delve team take this opportunity? Well, we've only begun to scratch the surface of what the Shadowlands has to offer, and yes, we know that hunters very much love their animal companions. We've always looked for opportunities to introduce new exotic ones, so no, nothing specific to announce right now, but I think as you see Shadowlands continue, we think hunters will be happy with what they have to look forward to. Does that mean nothing ever will come? I don't know why they answer questions like that. Demon Hunter is one of the most popular classes in World of Warcraft. It's because there's a lot of children playing the game, and Jix, and only one with just two specs to play. Will there be a third spec of Demon Hunter in the future, or will there be any classes in Shadowlands or later? Since Legion, there's been no new specs. Obviously, yeah, definitely not during Shadowlands. I don't know really why you even ask these questions. We will not be adding any new classes or new spec during Shadowlands, but anything is possible with expansions in the future. For Demon Hunters in particular, we actually plan on removing the class. The reason why is that two specs, we want to make sure that we weren't diluting or weakening the fantasy of the specs just to fit the number 3. To be fair, I've always felt like there should probably have only been one Demon Hunter spec. Havoc. Like, it feels like Havoc was the only spec that should have ever been made. And it was like, well, we definitely can't have one spec, right? So, anyway, another wasted question. Catch up on legendaries. This would be interesting. Blizzard removed the bonus roll system in Shadowlands and replaced it with the brand new Great Vault system. Not really. But many players felt that the bonus roll still beat the Great Vault, allowing players to pick one item out of 9 possible item options. In the future expansions, will the dev team consider let players pick maybe 2 or 3 out of 9? I don't have a specific change as to the Great Vault to announce right now, but we've definitely heard the feedback, and we know that while there's some randomness to it, we want to make sure that it feels like a satisfying reward. For sure, we think we can do better with the fallback reward. I don't think that Stygia that we currently offer really feels satisfying. Ideally, in a past expansion, it would have been something like Artifact Power. Ideally, even if you don't get the item of your dreams from the Great Vault, you still feel like you're getting something really useful, and we can do much better there. So, another very low commitment answer, but many players notice that the Ember Court event there is a bit hard to play with compared to the other covenants. Will be there any changes in future? Even farming Anima got buffed. Still, the effort is relatively small when a set of transmog or mount requires a couple thousand. Will there be more tuning about it in the future patches? Yes, so on the second part of the question first, we're actually in the process right now, as we speak, working on a hotfix that will give players access to increased anima drops from all sources. What we're actually doing is adding a couple of achievements for having all your features in your Covenant Sanctum at rank 1, rank 2, and rank 3, respectively. So that's just old. This is an old interview. I didn't even notice that. Anyway, in Shadowlands, for a variety of reasons, many players build the wrong legendary or simply choose the wrong secondary stats. Will there be possibly a refund? That's an interesting question. We don't have any current plans along those lines right now, but it's something that we can look at, providing some way of either changing your secondary stats or getting a partial refund. The thing that we want to be careful to avoid is a world where it feels too easy to make one legendary for one situation, then disenchant or change it to a different one for PvP. You don't really feel like you ever build a collection. But I agree that making a mistake there feels like it could be frustrating. It's good. It'd be interesting if there was some refund. I wouldn't mind like 20%, maybe like 40%. 40% of the costs I would love to get back. Maybe get the item back as well. Like the white item. What do class designers or the balancing team look for when balancing classes? Is it the feedback from players in the forum or maybe third-party websites? Or does the design philosophy try to play some weaker classes as reported? This is a great question. Can't wait to see the answer. Honestly, it's all of those things. I think the designer personally playing the class is not deciding if it's strong or weak, but to gain more insight into feedback as if it's to feeling bad. Sometimes a spec might be able to create the numbers, but it could feel frustrating to play. Or there's something that feels very random or just awkward, and that's the kind of thing that playtesting will give us the best insight to guide our changes. In terms of balance, we obviously are looking at how popular the different specializations are. We have some of our own internal data, but a lot of it matches the community, what the community is looking at, because at the end of the day, the community is looking at logs. They're looking at Raider.io, and that's where the raid leaders, and dungeon pug leaders to decide what they want to invite to their groups. At the end of the day, if the community thinks the spec is not good and they don't want to bring them to groups, well, it doesn't matter what our data internally says. We need to work to change that community perception. That's interesting because otherwise, people who play that spec can't play the game the way they want to, and they can't find group. That is a surprising answer. I'm very surprised to hear him say this out loud because it's wrong. I mean, that's just false, right? If the math, like actual facts, are that the class is not bad and people think it is anyway, what do you do? Like, how do you fix that? It's like, you're wrong, so we're gonna buff the specs so you're even more wrong. I mean, that's actually incorrect. Like, he's giving an answer that sounds like he's just trying to placate people, and it worries me because I guess it's very uncommon, right? But like, imagine if, like, I guess Ellie is in that boat, maybe, right? Ellie Shaman was not weak before, but it's kind of just not seen a lot of love recently. And then they buffed it, and now it's just even better. It's like, why would you buff that spec? I never understood it. It's hard to not notice that the current gameplay of an alt character is not that friendly. Players have to go through repeated Covenant quests, farming anima, doing the dangerous mock quest, and not even mentioning it takes at least 5 weeks for an alt character to upgrade their legendary. So, will there be more alt-friendly systems in 9.1? Yes. Chains of Domination will definitely add a lot of catch-up mechanisms, both for alts, but also returning players. For new players who are joining Shadowlands and hit level 60 at the time, it's going to be much more important for you to be able to get into the new content, to get a legendary without having to wait weeks for it, so that you can play with your friends and experience what everyone else is doing. So that will benefit both new and returning players and alts. So no. I mean, like, very general nothingness. I mean, what's the plan? Maybe there will be big plans, but I mean, these are not things to address. Like repeat Covenant quests, like, yeah, that's a good thing. First of all, you don't actually have to do, you do, I suppose, but like, no, you don't need to be 40 renown on your alts. Like, it's not mandatory. Farming anima, that's completely optional. Like, why would you need to do that? Doing the dangerous mock quests, again, completely optional at this point. I mean, sure, if you want to maximize your character with full sockets, you're going to have to play the game. And 5 weeks for an alt character to upgrade their legendary, I mean, that's how legendaries work. Yeah, so that's how it works. Yeah. I don't think these things are ever going to change. I don't know why he would even say yes, because none of that is going to be addressed, I'd imagine. But maybe leveling will have some changes. Yeah, we'll see. I don't know what they would change there. Anyway, in Shadowlands, each class can pick one of its 4 covenants at a time to play with. Many players felt that the limit of switching covenants greatly weakens the gameplay of each class, do they? Some classes can only play one spec due to their covenant choice because after they switch specs, the covenant will no longer be the best one. So you can't play the class, you can't play the spec at all because it's not the best one. That is, you got some balls saying that to him. Anyway, will there be more freedom of switching covenants in the future? Maybe not as easy as switching specs, but players would expect less consequences and quest lines. Let's see what he says. Unfortunately, I have to say that we don't currently plan on making it easier to switch. The current system where you can switch relatively straightforwardly, but if you want to go back and forth, there's a quest line and a cooldown between them, that's likely to remain. The thing that we're most interested in hearing feedback on is more about the situations where you feel like you're locked into one choice for one spec and a different one for another. We made a lot of changes in 905 patch to improve the balance between the different covenants, but we know that we have more work to do there. And that's something that we want to continue to work towards so that they have different strengths and weaknesses. And maybe one is slightly better here, or slightly better there, but you never feel like you have to be this or you have to be that. So I could elaborate on this question for him. Again, wrong. This is just not really how it works because the system has variety in it built into it. Like, so we talked about this a lot publicly with hunters. Hunters have 4 options, of course: Flayed Shot and to some degree Death Chakram, the Necrolord, and the Ventir one are not ever going to compete with Night Fae or the Kyrian one, simply because they're mostly a single target spell. Certainly Flayed Shot, single target. So they could tune that, they could keep buffing that, they could buff that 10 times, just never going to be good for 5-mans, right? So that's intended. They did this on purpose. It's not like anybody should be surprised that it occurred, but it's stopping them from being something that it could be even better, right? Like it's making the system, making people struggle with the decision. Let's put it that way. Do I think that's a problem? No, first of all. In that case, it's certainly not a problem because if you do a lot of Mythic Plus, whether you're BM and Marksman, it's the same pick. The problem then is more like perhaps what we talked about with Priest, where if you're Disc Priest, there's only one ability that actually functions as Disc Priest like modality. Like it's offensive ability that can help you heal more. There's only one, and that's the Ventor ability. The other 3 abilities do not do that, so they're always going to be weaker. Again, that's how it was designed. But it's not like that for Holy and Shadow because they don't value the same thing that Discipline does. So it's interesting. I don't know, like, there's no solution to that. But that's not actually what the person is typically asking. I would say he's more talking about something like what I've experienced on my Death Knight when I switched to Frost. So I love the Night Fae ability as Blood. It's amazing. I'm in love with it. I love everything about Night Fae. But it's clearly just shit for Frost and probably pretty damn bad for Unholy too. I'd love to be able to use the Ventir ability when I play Frost, but I don't play Frost serious enough to be worried about it. And even if I did, I would prefer to play Blood. So that's a decision I've made. Maybe it would be cool if there was some way that I could access another Covenant just on my off spec, but that's not really how the game works. So I would never expect them to allow for that. And I certainly would not allow them. I would certainly not expect them to allow me to just switch covenants every time I switch my spec. So yeah, I think they just need to balance them. They some need to be designed differently, and that's not going to happen. But that situation that I just described just needs to be balanced more. Like, how do you make Death's Due stronger for Frost and Unholy? I don't know. Make the spell do way more freaking damage? I mean, that's the problem. Like Blood, Death and Decay is up all the time. Heart Strike's up all the time. There's no concern. You're constantly getting stacks. You're constantly benefiting from both the strength and the damage reduction. As Frost, you don't need any of that. Like, it's useless. Like, I mean, it's really a useless spell. It doesn't help me at all. It's a mediocre AoE at best. Like, it's really poor compared to the actual spells. The strength buff, like, you don't have enough runes to spend because of how Obliterate, it uses 2 runes, right? So it's like, you don't get enough value from the strength proc part of it, and the defensive is irrelevant, completely useless, right? So it's like the spell's amazing for Blood and it's useless for the other 2. So change that. I don't know how, but I certainly don't expect them to allow me to just go Ventir. I don't know, some interesting questions. There's going to be more. I don't know. I guess this was now a couple weeks ago, I guess, but at least a week ago, based on the what was that? That was actually 2 weeks ago now, right? That they did the Azerite or the the Anima stuff. So let me know what you think. There'll be more talk about this Mythic Plus system. Although that's a bit weird, isn't it, though? Because the Mythic Plus system is clearly, like, if this wasn't even announced yet when this interview was done, then based on that. It's very strange. But I'm very eager to see this whole prideful, or this whole tyrannical and fortified interaction. Very eager. Mark my words. We'll be doing more videos on that in the future.